Samima, and welcome to the Real Talk Round Table. Now, the loss of a spouse is one of the most distressing events that most people will go through in their lives, and even more so in societies where there is a lack of gender equality and lack of social inclusion, especially for women. Today on the show, my guests get real on surviving widowhood.
They kind of look at you like a burden, like you're going to take your problems to them, asking them to give you money, to support you. So they keep off.
Before we had many family friends, both married, others not. But I just found out nobody wanted to come to our home.
For support, it's not so easy to get it. There are very few people who get support from society. And sometimes there's a blame game, almost like you're responsible for this person's death.
Hello there, thank you so much for choosing to join us. Today we are focusing on surviving widowhood. My guests will be sharing with us their stories. So introducing right now, I have Frida Imani. So Frida has been widowed for 27 years. I also have Janet, who has been widowed for 44 years. Karibuni kwenye round table. You know, I'm saying some of this here, Janet, you've been a widow for 44 years. That's older than I am right now. Wow. Hii miaka yote. So pengine acha tuanze na wewe. You say your husband died in 1977 and left you at the time with 5 children. So pengine tueleze mlikuwa mmeona kwa muda mgani na ikaja aje sasa bwana yako akakufa?
We got married in 1970. Then after those were 7 years. And we had 5 kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very young
Very young,
the time.
I was 30.
Wow.
I was 30. I was 30 when he passed on.
And how did he pass on?
Yeah, he was traveling to Mombasa, and they were about 4 people in the car. When they passed Mutitonde, the tire burst and the car rolled. 1 person died there. There was one who didn't have even a scratch. My husband had internal injuries. He was taken to Voi Hospital, and they found it was serious. He was flown to Nairobi Hospital. So the following day, which was our wedding anniversary, the 28th August, yeah, this is when he passed on. Yeah.
And I'm sure it must have been very devastating for you then as a young wife with 5 kids.
Yeah, even I didn't go to see him at Nairobi Hospital. I saw him when he came for burial at home. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was down at the village in Meru.
So we also have Frida. Frida, you've been widowed for 27 years. So maybe just help us understand how long you were married for and how your husband finally passed on.
My husband passed on in 1994. And we'd been married for about 12 years. And by the time he left, actually he died from complications of kidney because of diabetes.
So he'd been ill for a while?
Yes, he'd been ill for 2 years, in and out of hospital. And the day he died, I was present because I went to check him in ICU. And I still remember that in my, it's in my image. I still remember, because I went and found him all swollen with all the pipes around him. And that was it. So he left me with 5 children. And that's how it was.
So there you are, very young women then, and you've just lost a spouse. So how did life change? Let's start with you, Janet.
Yeah, like mine, it was sort of darkness. It's like, because the people who are around me, the family, it's like they never loved me with my children anymore. And
so now your husband's family?
Yeah, my husband's family. I don't know what happened, because they even, whatever we had, like cows, those things where we could get the milk for the children, they couldn't let us touch, could let me touch them.
Where were you living at the time?
I was in Meru.
In Meru. So now in the homestead kule nyumbani, they were taking things away from you? Yeah.
And they were cruel. They were not friendly. So I couldn't understand. I felt, I didn't understand. Sometimes they could chase me. They could lock the gate and then start even trying to beat me. I could pull my children through do the singing and go to the chief's camp and stay there the whole night. So my father, now my real father, found it, because they were not also comfortable. Every time they don't know whether we are there or not.
Because you were being mistreated.
Yeah, he went to the DO, because my father was a sub-chief once before he tried, so he went to the DO and asked to take us, not to take us as to take our daughter, but to take us so that he can take care of us. When things are better, we can go back. So I stayed with, he was permitted. So we stayed with my father for some time, but my heart was not comfortable. I said, why am I in my father's place and I have my home? So I decided to carry my children to Nairobi, to go, to run away. My father could not have allowed, so I went without him knowing.
And now when you were coming to Nairobi, what did you have in planned? Were you looking for a job? Did you have somewhere to stay?
I was still a teacher, but I never even went for a transfer. It's like my mind was not working right. I just deserted. I just went. I didn't know even where I was going, because when I reached, I didn't know where to go. It is another lady, the ones who sweep the road. I don't know whether they were, though they were city work. She's the one who understood what I was going through, because now I didn't know where to go. And she said, I'll go with you to my house. So she
So Good Samaritan.
Yeah, she took me in her house, where the house in Maringo Estate, where the house was full, because some of our daughters had also children. But she was a good lady, because she got mattresses. My children had a place to, well, she could make a big ugali and they eat. She was good.
And that's how you started life in
That's
Nairobi.
how I started life in Nairobi. Then when I told her about my transfer, she told me I know somebody in TSC. And the lady she took me to was from my place, and she knew my late husband. So I was transferred to a new school, because it was my mind. I don't know whether even in the class, because even at home I would stay for weeks without going to school.
Because you were still grieving.
Yeah, and I was confused.
Yeah.
I was confused.
Probably depression.
I think so.
Because of everything that you had been
Yeah,
through.
it came so sudden, and I had never experienced such a magnitude of
And what about your children? How did they handle this entire change? Losing their father, you know, being taken from their home, now you're moving to Nairobi.
You know, I think the first one is the only one who understood much.
Because they were old enough.
He was 7. He understood a bit, but the others, I don't think they understood. They got much. They didn't understand much. They didn't understand, but because even when they have grown up, it affected my firstborn. Yes, the others, something affected him, because he became like different from no progress in his life. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come to that. So what about for you, Frida? Because you say you were born Muslim, and at the point now when you were getting married to your husband, you converted to Christianity. And so there you are, a young woman, your husband has just passed on, and you're left within his family. How did they treat you, and how did life change for you thereafter?
Actually, I became a Christian after he passed on. That is, the complication came because I came from a Muslim family, and you know, when you're a Muslim, when you get married to another religious person, from a different religion, the family disowns you.
So now that the man was dead, your religion became an issue for the family?
No, even when he was alive, they didn't approve of that marriage.
Right.
Right? So I found myself alone, having married a Christian, so I found myself alone, rejected by my family.
Right.
And so for that matter, I started life on a wrong foot from the word go. So I continued with my marriage, but then after my husband passed on, I faced rejection from both my family and from my husband's family. Just like Janet, I had no support from any side. Yeah, I had to take
there
care
you
of
are
my
with
children.
5 kids?
Yes, alone.
So where did you
without my
start?
family.
Were you working? Did you have a business?
Fortunately, I was working in the bank. Yeah, so I had an income, so I didn't have financial problems per se. But still, being a single parent, you find you are stuck here and there because of school fees.
Yeah,
school fees, everything, including also discipline. When you're bringing up a child or children alone, one-sided, especially if you are a lady, you have issues with discipline the children. So my children were affected discipline-wise. They also faced rejection. Remember, they are not accepted from both sides.
Yeah, your family rejecting you because you married a Christian man, his family rejecting you
Because
you're
I came
Muslim.
from a Muslim.
So stuck in the
Yes,
middle.
yes,
Yeah.
that's the point. So I faced rejection, I faced loneliness, and I also was affected physically. My health deteriorated. I developed high blood pressure, I developed diabetes, I developed ulcers, I developed all kinds of illnesses. I was ever in hospital.
Because you're
in and
stressed,
out.
you're depressed, you're anxious.
You can't say that again. And then, to make matters even worse, I was at times not able to have enough money for school fees. So I had to go to
5
Shylocks.
kids, that's
yes.
a lot of...
I had to borrow money from Shylocks at an interest of 30%.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I brought up my kids, through loans from Shylocks. Yeah.
And that now means added stress. Because
Yes.
unalipa hii,
Aha.
unaomba.
We are talking. Yeah. So I went through a very stressful period.
Right.
And I was really down, even health-wise.
And so maybe let's talk now as women, because there you are, now you're wearing the cap of your mom and dad, you're the breadwinner. How was society treating you then? Do you feel that there is stigma around widows in this society? And let's start with society at large, then let's go even to other women. How were they treating you?
Yeah, like after my husband died, we had many family friends, both married, others not. But I just found out nobody wanted to come to our home. The couples, nobody wanted to come. It's like they left. Nobody came to our home. I don't know whether.
So you found yourself alone.
I found myself alone. Perhaps I don't know whether the wives were fearing. The husband would. I don't know whatever they were fearing, but they just never came. So a place where we had many visitors, you are just there alone at times with your children.
And also his family, nobody supporting you?
His family, no, they didn't. Okay. The support I got was from my family. My parents really supported me both there and even when I came to Nairobi. I remember my mom coming almost all the time from Meru, carrying everything.
Analeta
chakula. Na hata school fees, sometimes they could help me. Yeah, they could, and I got help from the teachers also. You are talking to them.
Right.
I could go, like I went to Ngara school one time because I was going to tell them, give my daughter at least a week. And the deputy says, I'll never forget that day. She tells me, Mama Ruth, the giant people, you call them the giants, those who support, they came and we gave Ruth's name. And they have paid. And when they paid for the whole year.
So she was able to be sponsored.
She was able to be sponsored for that year. And I got many miracles.
It was a small graces that God was providing.
Yeah, when my husband died, I was not born again. I was just religious, already. You don't know, but I came to know the Lord later, 87. And the church where I joined, God gave me grace with them because they were supportive, very supportive, very supportive.
And we thank God for that.
I thank God for that. Yeah.
And Frida, what about you? How do you feel like society stigmatizes widows, especially?
Not even society, even friends.
Even friends.
Yes.
What was your experience with that?
First of all, I lost, in fact, almost all my friends after my husband passed on, especially the women friends. Perhaps like Janet has said, maybe they thought I would interfere with their families.
Yeah, now you become a threat almost because
Yes.
their husband might take you as a second or third wife.
And then after that, they kind of look at you like a burden, like you're going to take your problems to them, asking them to give you money, to support you. So they keep off. So I found myself alone, literally alone, as in if I had to do anything, it had to be me. If I had to look for money, it would be me. If I had to talk to my children, it would be me. I didn't have anybody, any support from any quarter. And the beauty of it all is that even with all that, I'm a very strong believer in God. So I kept believing God would do the miracles. And he did the miracles because I was able to bring up those children. They finished school, they got employed. And by the time my children were just about to get out of school is when I got born again. So now I had the support from the church. That's where the church came in. And I was able to do the little things that I needed to do after they were already out of school and now maybe wanting some some little help here and there. I got the church to help me, to assist me, to talk to them, to maybe to be there for them. And for that matter, I was able now to see the bigger picture, that it's not about them, it's about God. Why did I have to pass through this? Maybe so that I can encourage other people, that even after 27 years, life can still go on.
And let's talk about that, because Janet, yours is 44 years as a widow, yours is 27 years.
Yes.
So these 44 years, these 27 years, you've never remarried?
No.
Why was that? Was it by choice or was it by circumstance?
I think I didn't, with that load of burden over me, all my love was directed to my children. I couldn't think of carrying my children to another man. I always thought they would perhaps mistreat them, although I don't think whether I had any time of that, because the burden was too much.
So you were not open to it at all? You focused on now being there for your kids?
Being there for my kids.
And also the fear that you're saying, which man will accept you? Which family will accept you with 5 kids?
Yeah, because when my in-laws were mistreating me, they were saying she is too young, she'll get married. Then I was asking them, who will marry me with 5 children? So my mind for marriage was not
just
there.
Closed up on that.
I closed up on that.
Any regrets?
No.
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
Now you are a grandmother.
Of 12.
Of 12.
And I am happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about you, Frida? Yako ni 27 years.
Yes. I didn't get remarried, but I think me is the circumstances, because like my sister says, the workload was so much, and you hardly think about getting married. Your mind is occupied. I'm occupied with thinking about those children. I'm occupied with thinking about their school fees, who will visit them at school, who will do their homeworks, house girls come and they run away. You understand all those issues in the family.
Yes.
Then I was working in the bank. I used to have keys for the safes, I was a senior officer.
So you're a career woman, you're a mom, you're a dad,
yes.
you're everything.
I was everything. So I think it didn't come at that point.
Right.
Yeah. But
do you think it's harder perhaps, because you've been very candid saying for you it was not by choice, it was by circumstance.
Yes.
Because hakuna simba ambaye alikaribia ambaye angeza kukusaidia na hiyo responsibility.
Exactly.
So do you feel like that's another point of stigma that widows go through, because they would perhaps love companionship? And I'm sure now, because you're both glowing, can I tell you guys, these women, they are in their prime time. Janet is 74. Frida, you're 74 years old.
73.
73 years old, we are sorry. You can't even tell. You know?
Thank God.
Yes.
You thank God, like you've lived such full lives.
Yeah.
And as single women now, for literally now, most of your life you've been single than married at this point.
Imagine. That is it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what advice would you give any woman who perhaps now is finding herself in widowhood, and like both of you, no support from family, no support from friends, watoto wako pale, what's the one thing you would tell her?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is to know that there is God. Yeah, life may be tough, but it won't be forever. Life goes in seasons. You might be in that season that time, but if you keep on believing and you keep on working towards breaking through, it will come. It won't be forever. Yeah, problems will go. Like now, my children were in school. Slowly, it just went. You one day at a time. One day at a time. Although it's not very easy. It's not very easy. Sometimes you find that it overwhelms you. Like me, I almost left my children because there was 83. I was in nursery, the hospital for 3 months. At that time, my children are in Dandora with the neighbors. I thank God for the neighbors who were there.
You had good people around you.
I had good people around me. Yeah, I think it's good also to be in good terms with the people.
They say, choose your friends.
Yeah, the people who are near you, because like that time now, my children would be just alone. But after that, God helped me. When I was almost also leaving them, I came back. So the time will come when it will pass away.
For sure.
Yeah.
What about your advice to widows?
First of all, widowhood is tough. one grieves a lot, and time does not heal. That's what I would like to tell them. Time does not heal. However, if you focus on God, heals. But even with focusing on God, one needs to go for counseling. Because remember I said I went through a lot of health issues at that time because I was going through depression. I actually got depression. Yeah. So they need to go for counseling. Yeah, see a therapist for them to help them to go through. But also if they can get a program that deals with healing, like the one Backlands Baptist Church runs, it's called Grief Share, where people go through healing sessions where they are able to talk it out, because once you keep everything in your heart, it accumulates and it also puts you down. But if you're able to talk it out, talk your issues out, when it comes out, you're able to get some relief of some sort. So I would advise them to also go for not just counseling, but they can also attach them to such programs, the healing programs that can help them move forward. Because remember, when you're grieving, you affect even your families. Even the next person who is next to you, they also get affected by that grief. It's not just about you. It's about everybody who is near you. So it's good to just go forward and see where you can get some counseling, and also that healing sessions, that a place that you can be able to talk it out. Even if you have friends, you can talk to your friends, talk it out, get it out of your heart, and you'll be able to move forward, and you'll be able to live. You know, it's called a new normal.
And there you go, you know. And one thing about depression usually is repressed feelings, repressed emotions. So find a support group near you, talk about it. That will help you at least to move past it. Well, that's all we have on this part of the show. Don't go too far. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the round table. Now, today on the show, we are focusing on surviving widowhood. As you've seen earlier from my two guests, Frida and Janet, really there is a sisterhood amongst widows. Now, my next two guests will be sharing with us how they have taken their personal experience and helping other women within the community. We have with us Millie Atieno. Millie, karibu kwenye round table, and Gladys Sanya. So, Millie, you've been a widow for 20 years.
Roughly 20.
Roughly 20 years. And Gladys, 12 years. Yeah. So let me start with you, Millie, 20 years, because you're 40 now. So you were widowed at almost in your early 20s. Yeah. Probably tell us about that.
I was young.
Very young.
I was a young girl.
Wow.
By then. Okay. I'm a mother of two. My first one is 23 years. Then my second was 19 years.
You look at me when you're talking.
Yeah, my second one is 19 years. This widowhood journey has not been very easy, especially to me coming from those sides of Nyanza. But through the help of God, I overcome it. And I'm now proud to be called a widow. That's why I am where I am today.
And when you say you were married young, how old were you when you got married?
I was almost 19.
19 years.
Yes.
And by the time your husband was passing on, how old were the kids?
Oh, my firstborn was 5 years old. Then my secondborn was almost 1 year.
And so once now your husband passed on, can we ask perhaps how he passed on?
Yeah, oh, okay. My husband was complaining about the headache. So we thought that his lenses was not good. So we went ahead to the hospital, changed the lenses. Still the guy was still complaining of the headache. It was for about 3 months, the man was no more. So I didn't understand it very well.
And at the time, were you living out of Nairobi?
Yeah, we were in Nairobi.
You were in Nairobi with him?
Yes, yes.
So once he passed on, who was there to support you? Was his family supportive? Was your family supportive?
Yeah, the relatives were there. My sister-in-law was there. The brother-in-law was there. And also my sister.
So yours is a bit different in that at least they were good to you.
Yeah, they were good to me. Though later on, they didn't help me, but I managed to educate my children.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about you, Gladys? How did your husband pass on?
Well, my husband got sick for just a few weeks and he passed on. It was just natural causes.
And for you as a young widow, what were your challenges that you had to go through?
Well, it was really traumatic because this man was my best friend. He was my mentor. I looked at him, other than just being my lover, my husband, he was kind of a father to me. When I fell in love with him, I looked at him as a father figure. This man loved me. This man cared for me. He mentored me. In that community where I got married, that is my community where I come from the Nyanza regions, there is some way women are taken as if they are family property, they are clan property. So, but when I came into this family, this man protected me through all those, in all those areas. He was protective of me. He loved me. Despite so many challenges, he was being told that this girl you are married to, this girl, huyu ni msichana wa town, we don't even understand this girl properly, but he loved me and he protected me.
So his death hit
so
you
his
hard.
death hit me hard. I didn't have anyone to look up to. In his family, he was the only kind of some source of income to even his family.
So he was the breadwinner all
Yes,
round.
he was the breadwinner all round.
And how many kids did you have at the point when he passed away?
I had four kids, 3 sons, 1 girl. The firstborn by then was around 17 years because he was in Form 3. The second one had just taken his exams for his class 8 exams. He was supposed to go to Form 1. And then the third one was a very small guy. By that time, he was 2.5 years. And the fourth one, the girl, was even almost a year.
And how did it affect your kids? Because as a wife, you've shared with us the impact and the vacuum that the loss of your spouse had on you. What about for your children?
It really affected them because for these older guys who were boys,
Because they were old enough.
Yes, they were that in that age now where these guys they were adolescents and teenage. They were in teenagehood. That is the time the children need their father most. They were looking up to him as their role model and as a father figure. These younger ones also, they were very young. In fact, I even tell them about their father now. They just hear that they had a father. They don't even, they were very young. They didn't even understand. Yes.
And do you feel that maybe having gone through this loss of a father impacted your kids? And has it shown up in their lives in any way or form?
Yes, it has really shown up. They reached a point where they kind of had some rebellion. You know, as an only parent, and especially a mother, raising up young guys, young men.
Young men.
So hard.
Yeah.
It's really complicated. And you know now, in this family where my children, when they were growing up, the other family, the father's family, was closer than mine. So in fact, these children walizoea sana the other side of the father's side. And the father's side, they are the ones who rejected us.
Now, baba yao amekufa, they didn't want anything
Baba
to
yao
do with.
amekufa, hii familia haitaki kutuona, wanataka hata kutunyang'anya the small house ile tuliachwa ndani, because that was the only property I can imagine that was left to us. They didn't want to see us. You know, most of the times when you see, ukiona hawa watu, widows, wanapigwa vita. Sometimes these guys, sometimes hata hakuna kitu ya maana ile wanapigiwa.
Yeah.
Wale wanaangalia mpaka ile kale kashamba, they inherited shamba there at home. So they want to make sure that they clear this family, wawaondoe so that wachukue mpaka kale kashamba wakunayo pale nyumbani. So these my in-laws, they were not even looking at the children.
They were
Leave alone
selfish.
me, they were selfish.
Yeah.
Leave alone just me, they were not even looking at these children. They didn't want anything to do with us. So they just wanted to do away with us completely. So that maybe they start from that small shamba there at home, Ushago, and then maybe they come to Nairobi here, where pale mahali tuko na kale kanyumba, so that wapate nafasi ya kufanya.
But you were able to keep your house?
I was able to keep my house, and I can tell you, Tamima, I'm a strong woman. And that one, I can tell you, it is because of that man, the father of my children. Because he mentored me, and most of the times, alikuwa ananionyesha, alikuwa ananiambia, you have to be strong. You have to do this. You have to forge ahead. You have to do this and this.
And it sounds to me like your husband had foresight.
Yes.
Because he must have left his affairs in order.
Yeah, he had left his affairs in order. That one, I can say everything was in order on his part, because
he knew his family.
he knew his family, yes. He knew his family.
And I really hope that if you're, a couple and you're a man, you're watching, because these are realities that happen so often in our society. So if you can, protect your wife, protect your kids. So if you're not going to be here, because yote ni ya Mungu, make sure you have a will, you have written down, this goes to this person, just to make sure that your widows are not left to be victims at the hands of, selfish relatives. Now, Millie, you're saying yours was a bit different, because you mentioned that you were widowed very young.
Yes.
And obviously coming from Nyanza, one of the things you had to deal with is that they wanted to inherit you as a wife.
Oh, they call it widow cleansing. I don't know what they cleanse on widows.
So what is widow cleansing exactly?
Okay, you get an inheritor.
What do you mean you get an inheritor?
When your husband dies, there is someone who they bring someone to inherit you,
so meaning
to
now
cleanse you.
you
which
have
mean-
to have sexual relations with
Yes,
that
you've
person.
carried the death in Luo Nyanza. So they bring a man to cleanse you.
A man from the same family?
Some from the same family, some they just bring for you a man.
So this was brought up to you that you would have
Like
to
my
be
case,
cleansed.
when my husband was being buried, I got an information that they'll shave my hair the 4th day. So I was like, niko rada. Being msichana mwenye alitoka town, so I was like, niko rada ya. So the 4th day, I saw an old woman with a scissor. They were talking. So finally, my mother-in-law told me, you sit down here, we want to shave your hair. Nikawambia, aha, my hair. That's why when I differed with them. The following day, I took my children to Nairobi. So my in-law kept on calling me, telling me, oh, come back home. We want to inherit you. Nikawambia, oh, Mimi, I'm not coming back home. So when you are a widow in Luo Nyanza, you faces a lot. You are being accused. You've killed their son. So many things. It wasn't good to my side when I was at home. That's why I decided to take my 2 children to Nairobi. When I came to Nairobi, I went to my sister's place. She accommodated me for so many years. I think like 12 years I was in her house. Then she decided to go home. So I started to be Millie and the family. And back by then, my girl, my firstborn, alifanya class 8. I didn't have money because when the husband died, I was doing this kibarua job. So my girl was to wait for another 1 year for her to join Form 1. She waited.
Because you didn't have money?
Yes, she joined Form 1. Reaching Form 2, it was hard. I got a letter from the principal telling me the girl is not going back to school because of the arrears. I thought, what could I do? I was stressed. So finally, I accepted widowhood. So one thing here, if you have accepted you are a widow, you will move on. So I accepted. The man is there. If the man is not there, so have to be a father and a mother. That's where I started my...
So you never remarried
No.
afterwards?
No,
was
no,
it
no.
by choice or was it by consequence?
No, by choice.
And why was it a choice that you elected to make?
You know, when my husband died, I asked myself so many questions. But the answer I got was, watoto wangu lazima wasome na watakuwa na baba wengine. That was it. So I didn't want any man around me because what I went through, it's me and my children who knows.
So widow now almost for 20 years. What about you, Gladys? Was it, you've been a widow now 12 years?
Yeah.
So is it that you've elected not to date or remarry, or is it by consequence?
Well, that is my choice, Tamima. It's my choice. And then my children, these younger ones, you know, they are still young. In fact, the boy that I was left with, who was 2.5 years, 2 years, is now in Form 1. The other one is in class 8, the girl. It's my choice. I want to bring up my children first. I want them to be comfortable. I don't want to introduce any man to their life first. I want them to grow up peacefully, health-wise, comfortably, and emotionally. I just want them to know that their father died. I don't want any man to come frustrating and confusing them. Marriages nowadays have so many challenges, Tamima. And, you know, some of these guys, these men who come to our lives,
The inheritors.
some they come, not really coming to marry us. As you can see at my age, I'm not young. I'm now a grown. I'm a mother now. In fact, I'm a grandmother. My second son already has a daughter. Well, I have no intention of remarrying. I am just comfortable through the experiences I see other women going through.
But what you're both doing is that you've turned your pain into purpose. So tell me
Yes.
about the program that you're running, almost like a sisterhood of widows, to support other women going through the same experience.
Well, through the challenges I went through, the stigma, the abuses from my in-laws, my brothers, and my sister-in-laws, that one, I want to separate my parents-in-law. They were not in that category of the frustrations I went through. My brother-in-laws and my sister-in-laws. And then one time when I was there at home, I happened to meet some older ladies, widows, in an administrative office there at home. And then these ladies, they started giving me their story. That time I was young, because when my husband died, I was almost 33 years. And then that one older widow gave me a part of her story. She told me, you are so young. Umewacha ukiwa tu hivi. Akaniambia safari ni mrefu. Akaniambia hii safari sio mzuri. And then she told me, in fact, I messed myself. I went and got inherited. And this inheritance, in fact, imeniletea shida. Because the children that I got from my husband, walifukuzwa kutoka kwa. But hawa wenye nimezaa na the brother-in-law, they are the ones wenye wanataka. So from there, nikachanuka. And then, in fact, that thing really stressed me. When I came back to Nairobi, we came and we started meeting with the widows where I stay. And then we formed a group called Rise Up Widows Meetup Organization. And that is how our support started from there. And our organization, in fact, it has extended from Embakasi area. It is now in the county, is in my county of origin, in Nyamira and Kisii. We have other smaller groups under Rise Up. So we are supporting each other emotionally, psychologically. We have empowerment programs that we are doing. And we've really seen God doing great in our lives.
Okay, well, keep up the good work. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the round table. Joining me right now, I have Tabitha Madheka, who has been a widow for 18 years, and also Margaret, who is a psychologist, and she'll be sharing with us some tools that can help anyone who perhaps is dealing with loss on how they can cope and get past this very, very traumatizing life experience. So let me start with you, Tabitha, because you've been a widow for 18 years.
Yes.
And you got married at 23.
Yes.
So at the time your husband was passing on, how many kids did you have then?
I had 2 children. I had just gotten my son.
You just gotten your son.
He was 2 days old.
And I can imagine that must have been very traumatic.
It was very devastating.
Because on one hand you're losing a husband, spouse, on the other hand you've just gotten a newborn. So you don't know whether to be happy, you don't know whether to be sad.
Yes.
And how were you able to deal with that?
It was very devastating. It was a very difficult time because I had just gotten my son, and then I got the news that my husband, the following day actually, he had passed on. Because we had agreed that he would come to see us in hospital, and he couldn't come because he was also admitted.
So his was sudden illness?
It wasn't sudden, but he wasn't very sick, because the time that he went to hospital, he was just going back for a checkup, a normal checkup, but he was detained. He was told that he could not go home, because the doctor diagnosed something different, so from what he was going to be checked on. So he had to be detained. So I got my baby, and then the following day we were released, and apparently he hadn't been released as well. So I had decided that I would go to see him in hospital, but it never happened because now he passed on the following day.
And was it hard for you afterwards?
It was very hard because my husband was one person who was ever there for me. He was a spoiler. He was the person who did everything for me. He would come, pick me, take me to the clinic from work, drop us back and go back to work. So he was the kind of a person that when he went, I was in shock. Yes, I was left like an orphan. Yes.
And who supported you through the grieving process and thereafter? His family, your family?
Now I heard I turned mostly to God. I really soaked myself in God, and throughout that time of grieving, and also my family really supported me, and also my in-laws, they also supported me.
Okay.
That time.
So maybe let me ask you this, Margaret, because we've had the stories of different women, different experiences. So obviously Tabitha is a bit lucky because she had support.
Yes.
But the reality is that most women usually don't.
That's
and
true.
there really are horror stories out there within the society.
Yes.
So what do people need to consider when it comes to losing a spouse, especially when it comes to your mental well-being?
A lot happens when you lose a spouse because you see you're connected in terms of your dreams and aspirations, and of course in building a home together. So everything is shattered. And then mostly when the widows are looking for support, it's not so easy to get it. There are very few people who get support from society. And sometimes there's a blame game, almost like you're responsible for this person's death. If he was unwell, did you take good care of him? Why didn't you alert people? And many times widows are innocent. They need psychological support to be able to go for therapy. They need help from friends and family. And they need to have even a support system, probably in their faith-based institution, if it is church or wherever it is they go to.
So obviously we know that there are stages of widowhood. Like she said, she was shocked, then there's
Yes.
the grief. So ideally, what are some of the tools that anyone who perhaps is going through this loss and grief can employ in their own life? Because nobody can really, plan death. Death is something unexpected. Yeah.
Yes.
And in most circumstances, it catches everyone unawares.
Yes.
So ideally, what would you say to someone who's just learned right now, your spouse is gone?
Grief and loss is inevitable for every human being to experience. And of course, the initial reaction is shock and denial. because your mind cannot fathom that this catastrophe has taken place. How is it possible? And as you go through healthy grief, it is good to confront it, because the moment you avoid it, it ends up causing a lot of trouble in terms of emotions and trauma. So being able to accept is actually the key to the beginning of your healing.
Right. We also have with us in studio Nelson Arser, who is a psychologist. Now, Nelson, I really want you to add on to this conversation, but really focusing on the men who have lost spouses. Most of my guests were women, and they were able to share how they coped. But I really want you to talk to the men, because, sometimes men can have a hard time processing emotions. Nelson?
Yes, thank you. Men have difficulty in processing emotions after the loss of their spouse, their wife. And this is contributed by the society looking at men as people who are strong, as people who are the providers of the needs around the family. And so when the support system that is around them is taken away, it leads them into a rock bottom of emotions, a pool of confusion, because grief is a new space when it happens for everyone. And also for men, it becomes a really difficult place for them to start. And the society really will look down on a man when he starts to cry, while he starts to lean into the grief that they are giving. So in the society, very few men really grieve in the appropriate way. Yeah.
Okay. And I want us to focus now maybe on the children, especially men who are left with kids. How can they especially help their kids cope with the loss of now a parent, and in this case, the mother?
When it comes to men supporting the family in terms of leading the children to process the grief, remember, grief you can only process your grief so that you can really help even your children to process grief. So one of the ways I think men ought to embrace in assisting children to process the grief is first of all sharing and speaking out the challenges that they face while they are engaging in parental duties, and also having an open discussion in terms of grieving as a family, embracing the family grief, talking to children. Where are you in your journey of grief? Where are you in your processing of emotions? What do you feel you miss the most about your mother? What do you think is something that we could do for us to celebrate our mother in a different way? So I think for men, embracing and having the talks, because children really feel grief. You might ignore them, but it is in them. It only can erupt when it has grown over a long time, over a long period of time. And so having open discussion is one of the ways of men assisting children to process grief, and also going for therapy, family therapy, getting a therapist who can take you through the process of grief as a family.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, a lot of what he said also touches on women, Margaret, I'm sure.
Yes.
And now, there's something common across all my guests, even from Frida, Janet, who are in their 70s, Millie, Tabitha, Gladys. And maybe let me ask you, Tabitha.
Yes.
Have you moved on? Is it something that you're considering?
Well, according to the Bible, that is something I'm free.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't say I am not.
So you're open to it?
Yes, I am.
If the right one comes along,
Absolutely.
You're willing to start a new chapter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And she's brave for that, because, a lot of the times, especially for widows, it's very difficult to move on. Why is that?
I think the attachment to the spouse, and also the thought of getting acquainted to someone else, and then the person doesn't fully accept the children, and that causes a disruption in their developmental stages and probably even education. So as wanting to protect the children as a mother, many times they can overlook their own emotional needs just for the sake of the children.
And incidentally, we find that especially in this society, it's easier for men to move on. Why is that also?
It is a patriarchal society in Africa, and it is more acceptable for a man to move on. And they question when a woman moves on pretty fast. In fact, the question is, was she just waiting for him to die so that she can now get married? And we are not kind to women. We are not.
Have you experienced that, Tabitha?
Very much so. I have found it's so hard to even accommodate the questions that you are asked about why haven't you moved on? And others are not up to the idea. You don't have to. You don't need to.
So you're judged either way. If you
Yes.
don't move on, you're judged.
Yes.
If you move on, you're judged.
That is
There's
it.
really no winning.
Yes.
And in that situation, so what advice would you give anyone who finds themselves now there, where you're like, you know what, if I start dating, I'll be judged. And if maybe I stay by myself also, you know, that comes with its own challenges. There can be loneliness.
That's a catch-22
Yeah.
situation. And I think it's an individual decision. Because as a widow, you need to decide what is best for me. There is no tailor-made or cut-out answer for every person. But as long as you know that you and your children are safe, then that is what you need to consider first and foremost.
Okay, and there's a term that I've come across. It's called widow syndrome.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Well, the widow syndrome is getting into a position whereby you kind of get into self-pity, and you kind of feel like the world owes you because you're a widow, and you get to a point where you do not even want to improve yourself or to do anything that is beneficial, and you're always watching out to see who's going to criticize you. And I think this can be very limiting. So it's good to be free. Emancipate yourself from people's thoughts and expectations of you. As long as you're not breaking any law, breaking any tradition, or doing anything that is outlandish, just keep within the rules of society and, of course, of God, if you do respect God, which is important. And you can move on with your life.
Okay, and Nelson, finally, maybe speaking to the men, what advice do you give to any man who perhaps wants to move on?
The advice I give to a man who wants to move on first is to question the intention of moving on. There is various intention that lies within the life of a man that might cause them to move on. For instance, family duties. You have young children that both working and taking care of them is a challenge. Then I think if a man looks at the well-being of the children and his well-being to raise a family, with regard to the good things about their spouse or the agreement that maybe was there, then a man could take the decision and allow himself to first process the grief and then allow himself to move on in a very appropriate way. But it includes discussions between various relationships that surround the man so that the decision that he moves into does not destroy the previous relationships that he has built with the previous, with the deceased or the late. So I think for me, when men take that initiative to move on, I think it's a support system to their way of life and also looking at the interest of the children to raise a beautiful family.
Well, okay, thank you so much for that, Nelson. Margaret, Tabitha, thank you so much for coming on the table. That's all the time we have on today's episode. And to you, I really do hope that you've learned something and we've earned the privilege of your time. Until next week, this has been Real Talk Roundtable with Tamima. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing.